So here I am in the source code responsible for the web application that we created in the last lecture. As you can see, I have three major components here: the home, the language, and the user component. All these components I am displaying under the app component here. You can see the app home, the app user, and the app language. I'm just loading all these components in the app components. So for app, you can see if I go into my language, I have the edit language and the language. So till the time I'm just gonna ignore these two, and we'll be working on this when we move to the advanced feature of the route. So let's stick to these three components. First of all, home component, language component, and the user component. So for loading these components, we need to register a route first of all. And the question arises, where do we register our routes? So if you think logically, these routes are responsible for our whole app applications. So let's suppose if I wanted to navigate to slash users, so I wanted to display that users information. And if I wanted to display the language information, so my domain slash language, and I wanted to display that page as well. Since this is really a core part of our app, we should register it in the app module.ts file. So this app module.ts, this is the file that I'm talking about. So this is because I believe that this is the perfect place to inform the Angular. So like if I wanted to go in a briefer way, I just want that the Angular gets informed that our routes are residing in this app component.ts file once the application compiles and gets into a bundle stuff. So let's add a route in the app module file. So I'll just create a const. I would say let's take a const route which should be of type routes, and make sure that you get this route information from the Angular route. You need to import the route module from that. So for that thing, I need to import it from import routes from I'm sorry, it should be singular. Okay, so make sure that you are importing the routes from the Angular router Angular file. Now with the import added and the constant setup, we need to see what exactly does this constant hold up. So in reality, it holds an array of items. This is because we can register multiple routes into this constant right now in the app module class. So we can do this in this way. Okay, and this constant needs two properties. First of all, one is the path. So this path actually define so you have the domain and you use a slash users, so you need to make sure that that path should be which component it needs to load. So it takes a path and a component property. So I have defined a path here. Let's say is a let's say I would say users, and the other property will be my component. I will be loading users component, right? Again, so the other one is, I guess, my language, which is component will be languages component, right? I'll just copy this and paste it to save time. This will be my home component. So for home component, I just wanted to make it as a default component for myself. So what So since we have three components, home, user and languages. So first of all, I need to change for home component. I need to, I don't have to define a path, so that when a single domain is entered into the URL, it loads the home page, home component. All right. And now the language part comes into play. Once I have the localhost colon 4200 / language, it should load the language component. And same goes with the users. So for users, it should use the users component. Users component. Now since we have provided the path to this constant, so we'll just save this one. And we for this thing we need to import another routing part for this thing. So right now these routes will be completely ignored by Angular, and the type routes here doesn't do anything. So we need to tell Angular somehow that we have registered these route in our app, and we want Angular that it should fetch these routes and provide the information on our web page. So for doing this, we need to add a new import here. So the import here is actually, so as I was saying, we need to add some import. So what import does we need to add? So router module is one of the file of router that is being used, and it asks, or it says Angular that we have registered our route, and this router module will be used to register our routes that we have already defined a constant above. So router module, make sure you add the corresponding import. So the import will be the Angular router itself. So it takes it have two property, that is for child method. For child is one of the method and for root is the, so we are currently using for root method, and we will be defining the app routes, the routes that we have defined above. So the for root for method, what it does is it tells Angular that you register a route from the root component, and the root component is app.module.ts file over here. Now since we have registered successfully our routes in app.module class, so in our app component we are loading our major components, app home, users and language component here itself. Since we have already defined a route in our app module, and now we want Angular to know that once we are when we are hitting the URL localhost colon 4200 / users, it tells Angular that we have the routes available, and we want to display all the information that we have under that route. So we have the path, and we have the component for users, a users component. So we need a place to display that thing. So where do we do? Since we are already defining placing our routes over here, app home, app users and app language, so we'll be we'll be telling Angular that we'll be displaying our routes here itself. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of all these divs that we have created, except one that we'll be using the app. Since we are currently displaying the app home by the selector itself, so we need to find a place for our routes to to let Angular know that so once we have the router, we need to fetch the information from there. And now you don't add your component with its selector, but you add a special directive ship in with Angular, that is the router outlet. So instead of this, we'll be using the router outlet. Make sure you use this just to render your routes. So once we are done with this, we'll just save our changes. I'll just go and save all the changes. So I'll just delete this, just save it. So we are done. We'll just check the UI. Here's the UI. So this is my app, and if I navigate to /users, I get the information that I have under users, right? Now if I change it to languages, then I'll get the information that we have under the languages. And since I have already defined a path that contains an empty path, if I did it, it says to welcome to student classes. So our routes are successfully working, but I know that the tabs click is not working correctly. So we'll be taking care of this in the next lecture. Currently we are sticking into that. And one more thing, let's say if I have added users, it shows me the correct, right? If I change this to something that we have not defined, slay users, it shows nothing. And if I check for the error, it says cannot match any routes. So please make sure that once you have defined the route, the path should be the same that you are entering it here. So in the next lecture we will be working on the links click. So when I click on study material and the students, the links, the required component get loaded successfully.